My name is Gustav. I am co-owner of Movimentum, where we are shooting videos for companies and institutions. And today I'm going to be reviewing the Sony A7 IV mirrorless camera. The camera is great for video. It shoots 10-bit 4:2 4K up to 60p. However, one thing to keep in mind is that the 60p is cropped to what corresponds to a Super 35 area of the sensor. Usually when you're shooting video, you want to be shooting S-Log free, which is a great log format that Sony has. However, it can be a little bit hard to get right the first time. So that's why the flexible codec is really handy, because if you happen to over or underexpose your footage, you can usually get away with correcting it in the post-production process. Another thing that is really great for video is the built-in image stabilization. This is a small camera, so having the stabilization is really important, because otherwise you're going to get a lot of micro jitters. So the fact that you have the IBIS built in is really nice. Another advantage of the IBIS is that the camera actually records the stabilization data, and you can take that into Sony's own Catalyst software and you can use it to stabilize it even further in post-production. However, the problem is that if you don't shoot for very high shutter speed, you're going to run into a lot of motion blur in your footage, which is very unusable in our opinion. So if you want to shoot that way, you have to keep in mind that you're going to have to shoot with a very high shutter speed. The autofocus is really nice. Just like all other Sony cameras, you have really great autofocus, and it's only been improved in the newer cameras, and this is a new camera, so you're going to get very great autofocus here. It knows faces, it knows objects, and most of the time you don't even have to pull focus yourself. So that's really handy if you're a one-man band or if you're shooting on a gimbal, for example, and you don't have a focus puller with you. The camera is not only great for video, it also shoots very great stills. It has a 33 megapixel full-frame sensor, which is more than ideal for shooting really nice still photos. So if you want a camera that can shoot both great video and great stills, this is definitely a camera to look out for. Considering the 33 megapixel sensor, you would think that the low light would be bad on this camera, but it isn't. It's actually very passable low light, and it's actually sort of competitive with the Sony A7 IV, even though it's not as good, but it's up there. The camera is very small, which is in a lot of cases a huge advantage, because if you take off the lens, it can literally fit in your pocket, so you can travel with it, you can do whatever you want with it, and you're not going to attract a lot of attention if you're shooting in public, for example. So that's a big advantage. Also, when you're shooting video, the sensor is actually downsampling from 7K to the 4K image that you're getting out of the camera. So you're actually getting some really sharp footage with a very good noise performance. Probably the main disadvantage of this camera is that when you're shooting in 4K 60p, you are going to get a crop corresponding to a Super 35 or APS-C area of the full-frame sensor. So that's one thing to keep in mind, because you're not going to actually be able to use the full sensor when shooting 60p. To some people, that may seem like a big disadvantage, but to me, it's not that big of a deal. I just put on a wider angle lens, and I honestly can't tell that big of a difference in the final product anyway. To me, the 60p issue isn't that big of a deal. One thing that is, however, sometimes a huge annoyance is the fact that the camera does tend to overheat in some situations. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you want to shoot very long sequences, you might run into some overheating issues. One way to remedy this problem is to go into the menu and changing the auto temperature turn-off settings from standard to high, and this does solve most of the problems, but it doesn't solve it completely. You might still run into some overheating issues occasionally, so that's one thing to keep in mind. One thing that people always complain about is the Sony menu system, and when I bought this camera, I came from a GH5, and to me, it was a big jump because it's not a very intuitive system. You have to spend a lot of time finding some settings, but in reality, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, if you spend maybe an hour or two with the camera before shooting with it, you're going to be okay. Another disadvantage of this camera is that it doesn't shoot 4K 120p. To me, that's really a luxury feature. I don't need 4K 120p, but maybe if you're shooting a lot of product shoots or food or sequences where you need a lot of slow motion, then obviously you should probably look into something like the Sony A7 IV instead. In my opinion, this camera is really easy to shoot with, so it's both great for beginners and advanced users alike, because it has all the features that an advanced user would want. It's also very handy to shoot with due to the built-in image stabilization and the autofocus. So it's great for everyone. In my opinion, this camera is best for shooting in hybrid situations where you need both video and stills. You're getting a bit of both worlds with this camera because it's actually really great for shooting video, but it also has really great stills capabilities. We use the camera as a B camera on set. We have the FX6 as our A cam, and this camera goes smoothly into that ecosystem because it's also a Sony camera. So if you're shooting with maybe an A7 III or an FX6 or an FX9, this is the perfect B camera because it can take nice B-roll footage, but you can also use it to take behind the scenes stills. I think that the most impressive thing about this camera is that it's very cheap and you're getting a lot of camera for the money. In my opinion, this is probably the best value deal that Sony has right now if you're looking for a hybrid camera. When you're looking at the market for hybrid cameras, you're actually going to be hard-pressed to find a camera that is better than this at this price point. There is a Sony Alpha A1, which is very expensive, and there's also the Canon R5, which is also very expensive and has huge overheating issues. This camera falls nicely in between and provides a very affordable solution for people who want a hybrid camera that doesn't overheat constantly. One of the main selling points of this camera is that it's very cheap, both to rent and to buy. If you want to buy it, it's approximately 20,000 kroner, and if you want to rent it, it's around 600 kroner per day. So you're getting a lot of camera for the money, and considering that this is a hybrid camera, you're actually getting two cameras in one. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you found these tips helpful and that you're going to have a lot of fun shooting with this camera. My name is Gustav, and you're welcome to check me and my company out at www.movimentum.dk.